to call this meeting to order. It's the regular meeting of council held Tuesday, September 21st, 2021. Now we have a number of changes to the agenda. The one thing I want council to move on is item 12.1, protective services costs and crime stats. Why don't you move them to 7.1 and have 7.1 move as item number 7.2.
So moved. Second.
Second, and all in favor? Melba?
Yes.
Okay, that was unanimous. It needs to be unanimous. Okay, thank you. So that has moved right up after the adoption of the minutes. We had item 4.1 with an error. We can deal with that in the meeting. There is no delegation tonight, so that comes off the agenda. This one has been changed. And staff have withdrawn item 8.1, so that too is withdrawn. And that'll be on the next meeting, I assume.
Yes, Your Worship.
So we welcome. We have a rally, a crime and merit rally outside, and I've provided a few minutes for the organizer, Jane Hauser, to come and speak to us about some of the issues. And if you can push the button. There.
Now you can hear me? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you for having me tonight. My name is Jane Hauser. I just wanted to explain a little bit why we're gathered here tonight. Well, it's due to the escalating crime in our city. Can't see anything.
Glasses and masks.
Oh, it's terrible. This is better. As you can see, a lot of people turned out. People are gathering because they are concerned, they're angry, they're mad. Citizens, business owners, and homeowners are being robbed and harassed daily. People are afraid to walk downtown. There's a few ladies I talked to out there that said they are afraid to go downtown. And people are afraid in their homes. I've had multiple messages of people letting me know that they don't actually sleep at night. They guard their property in their house, which is crazy to me. We need answers. We need help. And as you guys, we talked about this outside, about how rumors can spread really fast in a small town. So a few of the questions that myself and other people would like to know is, and we did speak about it outside, we spoke to Mayor Brown regarding the idea that people are being relocated here and the city is receiving money or grants or funds. I'm just going to go through these, and then after maybe we can talk about the actual points. There's other things. When there's a known thief arrested and let go, and the person is told that the jail was too full to hold them, was what their words were. This is concerning to us, and is it true? Like, we don't know. I don't want to go by rumors, and I don't want to make assumptions. So we actually did talk about this outside, because there seems to be very little police presence in the high crime areas. Now, I want to make it very clear, I do not blame the RCMP. That's not what I'm doing. I think people are concerned because, well, they're uninformed. They don't know how many, I didn't know how many police officers were in Merritt until just now. And how many patrol the town, and how many are on the highway, that sort of thing, and where, like, and even how that works. I think that people never really had to know or didn't really care before, and now they're starting to be concerned because they don't see police in their areas, and police make people feel safe. So another point is the community, myself, my whole block, we know where the drug house is on our block. They deal drugs. They do it freely and easily any time of day and night. And drugs are getting dealt behind the Canco gas station. I could go on and on and on. but the gist of it is we don't see any patrols in our area. And yes, I used to phone. I did. I would phone and phone, and it's to the point where I don't want to phone anymore because it doesn't seem to help. It actually just seems to, it sort of just becomes a hassle and nothing really happens. So that's all I'll talk about the RCMP. I need to learn more about that. I was unaware, and I think most people are. But that is a concern, that we don't see more around our area, and I guess that area would be on the corner of Merritt and Blair, right beside the mill. It's a really bad area. Anyways, going on, people have asked me to bring up how they could get security at the banks in town, RBC and CIBC. People are afraid to go do their banking. Men have actually escorted women into the bank machines because they're too afraid to go in. They've been accosted for money, harassed. They're afraid. And the obvious one, people want to know where grant money and government funds are being spent. And I think that people do need to take that on a bit of themselves to find out. Like, I'm learning really fast that that's all available for people to know, but people need to find out. So, together as a group of us, we are obviously frustrated, we're mad. We are the law-abiding citizens and we are being victimized. The thieves and the criminals seem to have very little or no repercussions. So they obviously know this, and they continuously, the crime just continues to go because nothing really seems to be done. It's a kind of a joke, and it's frustrating to us because we really have no voice. There seems to be no justice, and we live in fear in our lives. Like, I'm just a woman trying to live my life on Granite Avenue, and I don't want to go outside my front door because I actually look down the street both ways before I exit my house because I'm afraid. I don't want to go outside by myself. Hundreds of people have contacted me just through Facebook and through email to try and share their story with you, but I'm not going to do that. That would take hours. What I'm really trying to do and hope is that you guys can grasp the magnitude of what this means for our community and how we feel and how we have to live every day. In reading the letters, which actually I only have a few, I thought there would be more letters to bring you. And just by us all being here tonight, I just hope you guys can truly see how desperately we are needing help. We're pleading, we're begging, we don't know what to do. I'm not at all fluent in politics, and I don't know what the next step is. I've said before, I'm just one person trying to have many voices heard. At this time, I don't know what the answer is, how to fix this, but I do know that it's not going to be an easy fix. It's not just going to be fixed in a day or in a month. And I absolutely welcome your answers and solutions. And another thing I was actually just wanted to bring up, I just thought of this. The community, I was talking to a group of men outside. I think what happens is miscommunication. A lot of people don't understand that they can watch these council meetings online. They can get the minutes like Tony showed me. I didn't even know you could do that. People are unaware, and it's not always easy for everybody to get answers. So of course they listen to rumors and gossip and make assumptions, and that's bad in my mind because it makes people angry and then bad things come of it. So I was trying to figure out a way to make it easier for the actual public to communicate or to even see. I don't know how we could do that, or maybe in the newspaper, I don't know. So that's just an idea. That is the average, everybody reads the newspaper, not everyone's on Facebook or even on a computer. So I'm not sure how we can do that. Yeah, people are stressed, they're stressed and they're in fear. The bottom line, the reason why I'm here, the only reason is that I just want Merritt to be a safe and healthy place to live again. I've been here for 20 years. I raised my kids over there. My daughter just actually left and moved to the island, and she became a teacher, and it broke my heart, but she said, Mom, I don't want to raise kids here. And she left, and it's breaking my heart, but I know I don't blame her. So anyways, with that, I'll just say thank you again for having me, and I hope that we can work together for a better tomorrow. And that's it. So, I don't know if I should write down some things to take back out.
I don't know that we can answer a lot of your
I know.
questions here. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that you've asked.
I know.
I mean, the first question you said is, are we relocating them here?
I know.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
People are coming because they're coming.
Yes, and you made that clear outside too, and I've tried to explain that to people. But again, people don't believe, maybe they just don't want to believe me.
And if you want to sit for the next presentation, we have RCMP looking at protective services, which is their services, and they will speak to it.
Okay.
So you're welcome to sit and
How about we
join on
just
that.
leave this for now, and then I'll contact you. I'll
That sounds
email
good.
you, and we can work through it that way, and I'll just explain that there's just no time.
And they can always send
I did
letters.
tell them that they can contact you, and that you guys did respond to me. And I don't think people really think that you will. And so if they have questions, they need to reach out. And
They do.
Ask.
And if they don't want to call or text me or write, email me is the word, directly, then Greg, can we have a email address that some of these people can send their information to?
Absolutely, Your Worship. The city has the info@merritt.ca email address that any resident can send any concern to, and staff will always triage those and send them to the most appropriate location.
That's right. Okay. I have that address, email address.
And I try to respond to every letter, every email.
I know you.
I don't always manage to do it. Sometimes I just miss them.
That's okay.
But I do try.
Okay.
So
So again, I thank you.
I'm willing to give it a try.
No, I will. I actually told them that you will respond to them. Okay, I'm going to sit down now. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to adoption of the minutes, 4.1. Now, Greg passed me a note recently that our overhead camera is not working, so we can't see Melva and Adam. So when we do the vote, I'll have to mention who is voting for and against. So the adoption of the minutes, we've had, we need a motion, a mover and a seconder, and Carrie to actually move the agenda with the changes that, what's the number? That number 9.3 is not properly recorded as moved, second, and carried in the minutes, but it actually was moved. So we're moving the minutes as amended, adding the correct mover, seconder, and carried in the minutes.
Yes, Your Worship.
So we're looking at special council meeting held on August 31st, 2021 to be adopted as amended.
Second.
Christopherson and Luck. And that was one of the errors and omissions. Any other ones? Okay, all in favor? Approved unanimously. And we are moving to 12.1, the police protective report. Oh, I know that's not what it's called, but protective services costs and crime stats. And Sean, Sean Sprang, are you going to open? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just to clarify from the earlier comment, so this particular report was put forward as more of a financially indicated report. So there's a number of questions about what we're spending on protective services, what we're receiving in terms of members of attachment, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where this report originally came from. Stefan is here to answer any follow-up questions that there is, but I believe that there is also a police committee meeting later on in the week that is going to be more directed there as well. So that's more going to have specific, call-out statistics and stuff like this, stuff like that. This is more of a financial report that's bridged into some statistical areas. So I'll kind of go over this.
Before you do that, you mentioned the police committee meeting, and that is an open public meeting on September 24th, 2021. Do we have a time?
1:30 p.m. Your Worship.
1:30 p.m.
Thank you. I'll go over this. It is a fairly lengthy report, which I ripped a lot of content out already, but I'm assuming that most people have read through this at this point. So if there are kind of in-depth questions, for sure, make note, ask them, and we can go into more detail on any specific metric here, but I'll kind of go through more of a higher level review of where this report is. So, excuse me. As I mentioned, the original purpose of this report was to examine spending on protective services in Merritt and then compare it to, of course, we've got to compare it to other communities because nobody exists in a vacuum. The problem with this, I made the differentiation that the only thing that would be available in this is publicly available statistics, or documented in this is publicly available statistics. And in protective services, that includes a number of things such as RCMP, fire services, the wonderful Greg. There's a bunch of different roles and responsibilities in that. So when we were looking at comparison communities, we had to pull out some communities that weren't comparable for one reason or another. And I know the RCMP uses some communities such as Revelstoke, which is a very comparable community. It's not super useful for us to compare because they have career fire staff rather than POC fire staff, which significantly changes spending in that department. So just as a bit of methodology for why we picked these 20 different communities, a lot of it was actually to do with fire services and comparing between other interior communities or comparable communities. So Merritt, of course, I'm sure we're all familiar with our budget at this point. Protective services, other than public works, is I think our second largest aggregate line item. 2021 budget for it is $4.5 million, which is 26% of our total expenditures during the year. This is, if you'll, yeah, that way. Compared to, I think there was actually 30 in this original one that we started with. This is a much higher percentage. This one's 23.08 because it takes 2020 and 2019 and averages them together. But in 2021, we're up to 26%. So we do spend a fairly high amount of the budget on protective services, which again includes fire, RCMP, and some administrative. Sorry.
And from 20 to 21, we've added 2 RCMP officers on that. That's why our total increases from 20 to 21.
There, without pulling apart the in-depth budget, that is a big line item, and there were some adjustments to some of the RCMP expenses on an individual basis and whatnot. But yes, we certainly have increased our expenses as a percentage of the budget, and some of that was moving from 15 to 17 municipally funded RCMP positions. So when you look at this, the next graph, we are number 3 in spending per person. When you look at the population of Merritt, we spend a lot on protective services, and so you can kind of see in this graph, it became very obvious that there was between 4 to 5, depending upon what metric you're looking at, communities that spent a fairly large amount of money on however you broke it up, on a per person basis, on a portfolio basis, whatever it was. And Merritt is usually around that 3 or 4. In this particular, we are number 3. And then, of course, that begs the question, what do you get for that? And from protective services, of course, you get fire, but you get a certain number of RCMP officers. And as you would expect with the number 3 funding per person, we have the number 3 officers per 1,000 population. So Merritt has, I believe the population statistic that was used is 7,800 or so, and so we have almost 2 officers per 1,000 population, which is quite high. After that, we looked at more what are the officers doing, right? Like nobody believed that we have a whole bunch of RCMP officers who are just sitting around and doing nothing. So we went and looked at that, and Merritt also has one of the higher than average caseload per officer, and actually, to our local RCMP's credit, they have one of the highest clearing rates, which is defined as the cases that are actually cleared in one way or another in all of BC as well. So we have more spending, more officers, and more crimes being solved, which is honestly a good news story. It's obviously a well-funded, well-executed, well-run department, but they're busy. They're absolutely busy. The staffing levels, as in the report, so we kind of mentioned we moved up to 17 funded positions for the 2021 year, which I believe are actually full now. As we had chatted the other day, there's a difference between actual RCMP and funded RCMP, and we've had previous years before I've been here where we've had 15 positions, but this is totally a federal thing, and how much manpower they're pushing into recruitment. We could have been shy a couple of officers, but we're actually, I believe, up to full complement now, which is a great thing to see for sure. Also, out of the detachment are 5 provincial members, and then IPF, or Indigenous Policing Service, has 4 members as well. In addition to that, and more speaking towards the comments earlier, there is specific highway agents that run traffic stops and speed checks and things like that, right? So certainly none of these statistics that we're talking about are people up on the Coquihalla running radar guns. This is people who are dealing in some fashion with some aspect of local policing, be it general duty or investigative or whatever it might be. One important thing that we talked about that I will draw attention to in summary format is in early 2020 there was a change in the way the Provincial Highway Patrol responded to incidents on the Coquihalla Highway, or actually on any highway I should say, whatever highway it is. Previously, from what I gather, numerous highway incidents were dealt with by the Provincial Highway Patrol. In early 2020 there was some federal or administrative decision made, or provincial decision made, that those officers would not be used for incident response anymore and would only be used for enforcement. Am I using the right terminology here?
Enforcement, but with some exceptions, they do take on fatal crash on the highways when there is a criminality that is confirmed. So it narrows the gap, or it narrows the cases that they do respond to, when there's a fatality. If that answers your question.
Perfect, thanks. And so, also this year, and in the last probably year and a half here, our RCMP has been leaned on fairly heavily from outlying communities. When door knocking needed to take place in Logan Lake, I know a lot of our members were dispatched to Logan Lake in order to do that. And that's just part of the job and part of the funding, and I'm quite sure that if Merritt needed an evacuation order, Lytton or Logan Lake would come here as well. Except for the fact that actually, another thing, Logan Lake, our RCMP locally are running part of Logan Lake's RCMP services, which is another point on here. That's perhaps not the best example.
I wasn't going to say it.
Thank you. So, the upshot here is that we're not a bedroom community. We're not, we're not Burnaby. We're not some place just outside of a major center. We are responsible for a lot of other communities in the area, and that leads to a very, very busy RCMP service in a lot of extra municipal and intermunicipal as well. And then we looked at some crime statistics. That wasn't the point of this study by any means, but there was some additional inquiry in terms of what are the results. And I think when most people think about, hey, we're going to spend more money on RCMP, we're going to get less crimes because we'll have more RCMP presence. And what we discovered in the statistics is that that doesn't necessarily bear to be true. Not to make the logical fallacy here that spending more RCMP somehow leads to a higher crime rate in the community, but there seemed to be something about 4 or 5 communities, comparison communities, that just made more cases, and thus the citizens of that community were being asked to pay higher taxes for that. In Merritt, we're being asked to pay approximately $1,050 per folio, so per property more or less, on protective services. And there's places like, Shelt Armstrong, kind of at the lower end, that they're being asked to pay $250. That is a community. It was very, very clear that that is based on the community and not necessarily the number of RCMP officers. There's something in these 5 communities for sure, and something similar within these 5 communities that means that they just have a higher incident of call-outs, a higher incidence of something going on, and of course they need more RCMP officers to deal with that. So when you look at property crimes per 1,000 population, and most of these stats, obviously you can't compare a town of 3,000 or city of 3,000 people to a city of 10,000 people. They're all leveled for per 1,000 population. So you can see in this graph there was a gigantic downswing in 2020. I think largely the agreement is due to COVID. People were staying at home, et cetera, et cetera. But it's these 5 communities at the top, and then that dotted line at the bottom was the average of the other 15 communities. And they honestly, I had a graph with all of them. They didn't deviate much from the dotted line, and it was just quite cluttered. So there's something different about these 5 communities, of which Merritt just happens to be one. Nonviolent crime, very, very similar story. Crime severity index. So I don't make these statistics, but from what I gather about crime severity index, they'll look at the exact crime being committed, they'll look at how many of them there are per population, and they'll come up with a crime severity index that indicates what's going on in that particular community. And again, Merritt from 2016-17 increased, and then 2020 is kind of an odd year. And every single statistic that you can put to paper, it's a weird year. I think in the future everyone will just throw 2020 out. Property crimes per officer. I think this one is a really important one to look at as well. So this was more what we were speaking to in terms of we have a lot of RCMP officers. Are they busy? Yes. By this metric, they're the 2nd busiest in all of the comparable communities in terms of property crime. So even though there has been a significant decrease in overall crime in 2020, which was awesome, we'll take it for whatever reason it is, property crimes in specific were one area that I kind of stumbled across, again, through publicly available statistics, that it was higher. We put more officers on the job, and it was still higher. So none of this presentation is at all talking about why this is the case. All that this presentation is meant to do is say that how much we're spending, what we're getting, and what are some comparable communities. And at that point, there is probably a need to see what's the same thing about these communities. They're all in provincial highways, whatever that is. And to look at best practices within these communities, right? It's not going to be a heck of a lot of good for us to go talk to people in Armstrong and see what they're doing, because they're just in a different situation. But when you look at Williams Lake, Quesnel, Hope, whatever they're doing and whatever programs that they're doing are probably going to be somewhat useful for us to establish a bit of communication rapport, because they seem to be going through the exact same issues. The next graph in here, we were trying to establish a couple of things in terms of what's going on. This particular one is a little bit difficult because it's a very small sample size. So drug toxicity death per 100,000 population, obviously significantly up in the entire province in 2020 and 2021. And in Merritt in specific, take it with a grain of salt. We are at a very high rate compared to where we've been historically, but again, in these specific statistics, it was 6 people. So going from 5 to 6 to 7 would drastically increase that, or decrease it in the case of 5. But at the end of the day, there is a general trend that we can follow, in that drug toxicity is increasing in the community. If we may not be the highest in all the communities, as this graph is saying, because it is a small sample size, but it is higher than historical. So in summary, we are spending a lot of money per person, per house on our CMP. We are getting, from what I can see from these statistics, really good value, really good case clearance rates, really good cases per officer. They all look great, but there is just something in this community, similar to the other 4, that is just causing a higher rate of crime, that we just have to invest more money into keeping the community safe, which honestly I think that we are. It would be, from my perspective as a financial officer in the city, I mean, part of my job is to make sure that we're spending a reasonable and comparable amount of money. It would be hard to justify a significant cost increase when we're already between number 1 and number 3. Like we were number 3 officer per 100,000 when we were 15 officers, and now we're 17. So the important thing to recognize about that is municipally funded officers. So we have 17 municipally funded. We are on a provincial highway. We are on a number of provincial highways. At the crossroads, we do have 5 provincial officers that are meant to be dealing with anything that happens outside of municipal boundaries. I didn't do any in-depth analysis in terms of, we had some basic discussions on what that split was. I can't really speak to that in terms of what the split is, but certainly, like, as we grow, I think we'll probably need more officers, even though we're at a fairly high rate, but certainly we need to evaluate, you know, where our officers are being asked to spend their time as well. I really don't think I have a lot else other than that, and if there's questions on these specific statistics, I can answer them, and if there's questions about how the department operates, I will defer across the room. And if there's no questions, that's all good too.
It looks like Councillor White has a question. Councillor White?
I'm wondering why we don't have any a tribal police group here.
I know that we do have 4 what they call IPS, or Indigenous Police Service officers, and so their primary mandate is to conduct community relations with the various reserve populations. So go to the reserves, talk to the leaders, and establish programs like that. If we're talking about something different, I might have to defer to staff. But
I'm talking different. I'm
okay.
talking an actual, like some communities have a tribal police.
And I have not introduced you to our online world, but this is Staff Sergeant Major Stefan Druin.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure this is working here. Lincoln. There you go. Thank you, Your Worship, Council. I just want to take a minute to thank Jane for coming to talk about this. It's important, and it's important that I think our citizens have a voice. So I'm happy that you're here. Thank you. Councillor, to answer your question about the tribal force, essentially that's would be an agreement that needs to be established between, I believe, the provincial and the federal government and the bands, right? And so, simply said, there's no tribal police force here because one has not been established. Now that said, however, we do have, we are funded through the Community Tripartite Agreement to have a 4-member contingent. That's the Indigenous Policing Unit that Sean was talking about. It's important for me to highlight that the mandate of this unit is set federally, and the mandate is not intended to be a core policing response nature, a core policing response. Like Sean said, they are mandated to work on crime prevention with the bands, specifically with the bands. To respond to core policing demands on reserves and in the provincial areas, we are funded by the provincial government with 5 positions. One of those positions is the sergeant, second in command of the detachment. So as you can understand or appreciate, he's not in a what I would refer to as a frontline patrol officer. So I guess what I'm saying is that leaves me 4 officers funded by the province to primarily responsible for core policing in all of our reserves and provincial highway any provincial jurisdiction that we cover and everything else in between. And that's not to talk about Logan Lake as well. As a result, often, as you can imagine, there are sometimes needs for a bigger response than that, than what I'm able to provide. And what I will talk about on Friday with the police committee is what percentage of that work happening outside of the city limit is actually done by officers that are funded by the city, frankly.
Would it not take pressure off of the RCMP to have that tribal group, or I don't know what you want to call it?
To have a tribal police force? Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, certainly it would, but it would also likely result in funding being pulled for the Indigenous policing unit.
Okay, thank you.
Staff Sergeant Drouin, do you have other comments that you'd like to make? Or do we have any questions for Staff Sergeant so that we can, so he can respond directly to something?
Yes, I have a follow-up question.
I don't have a question for Staff Sergeant, but go ahead.
Councillor Van
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. This is the first I'm hearing of a tribal police force. If you could explain it a little more in detail, if possible, and the benefits to a city of having such a unit, if possible. Thank you.
I don't know if there's a benefit for the city for a tribal police force, because the tribal police force, I'll use the Statlium Tribal Police Force as an example in Littlewood, right? They are specifically a police force for the bands that they police. So I don't know that there's a direct benefit for, let's say, a neighboring city. You know, other than to say that, you know, let's say the local city force may be less directly involved in policing those bands, but it's important to understand that I think even in Lillooet, we see a relationship between the tribal police force and the RCMP working together quite strongly, as I am led to believe. And often, you know, the neighboring police force, in this case, let's say the Lillooet RCMP, would be called to assist the tribal police and vice versa, right? So there is a relationship like this. So it's hard for me to say, you know, in a true sense, what benefit, you know, there is to a city, you know. So I don't want to try to go further than that. I mean, that's unfortunately my answer again.
That's good, thank you.
But from what I understand, tribal police are on reserve only. They don't travel off the reserve to do policing on behalf of the city. They are strictly on reserve.
That's correct, Your Worship.
And Councillor Luck?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Well, the first thing I want to do is thank staff, in particular Sean, for putting this a rather eye-opening report together. I'm going to step back, and as a taxpayer, I'm aghast at some of the numbers that I see in here. It's realizing how much I am paying for protective services here in the city. And as you went through that, I couldn't help but see that we've talked about on page 2, where you talked about how much of a percentage we're paying. You said it's up to 26%, and this 26% is with paid on-call firefighters, not full-time firefighters. Is that correct? So can I assume that if we had full-time fires, this number would even be higher? Is that a correct assumption? Correct me if I'm wrong.
So, thank you, Councillor Luck, to the Mayor. There's some nuance to those numbers.
Okay.
In particular, it's actually probably, it probably goes the other way. Merritt has the enviable position of running an extremely efficient WEP program, which I actually learned a little bit more about today. And I don't know any specific numbers on our wet program, but it's generally agreed that our wet program is significantly more efficient than it would be just running a pure POC staff. So we actually probably spend a little bit less on fire services than some of these comparable jurisdictions. So when you're looking at these numbers, and again, I don't have specific statistics to back this up, but we might actually, there's a good argument that we might be tipped a little bit more towards RCMP spending than fire spending in these numbers.
Okay. Normally in a report like this, we get some kind of recommendation. I'm going through here and I've got a bunch of highlights and everything, some recommendations. So I think that I'm gonna probably not make one tonight. I think I'd like to be able to come back later sometime there and maybe make a notice of motion or something. Oh, she's pointing
Is
to
this
some.
provided for information only at this point? There is no,
Council may make a
There is
motion
no
to direct staff to take their
resolution.
fashion if they wish. So we do have that opportunity. So I'm gonna think I will take it back and have a look, but there might be some, because we really need to drill down in these numbers a lot harder than we are, because if we're paying 3 times as much as some other communities, there's a lot of questions to be answered there as far as I'm concerned.
and if we're looking to drill down, I'm hoping that maybe you're suggesting the finance committee do that?
I think that would be a good place to start, absolutely, Mayor. I agree with you totally. That'd be a great place to start, because there's something inefficient going on here, that's for sure.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Your Worship. And one thing that is probably evident from this report, but I think it's important for Council to understand as well, is as you see an increase in percentage, I think that you naturally jump to thinking that costs are escalating, we're spending more and more and more on this. I think it's also important to recognize that it's a function of your overall expenditures, and so if our community is bringing in less, but we're required to spend the same amount, where you have a decline in industry, cocoa and other fairly large industry leaves the community, that doesn't mean that you can stop policing in the community, and so you find that it takes up a greater percentage of the overall expenditure because you have less coming in, but this is one expense that is tough to scale unless the population also scales, and that wasn't necessarily what happened. So the revenue scales back, but not the population. So I think that Finance Committee and Police Committee are really good spots to start discussing some of these things in a little bit more detail.
That would be good.
Councillor Fair?
Thank you. I have a question for Sergeant Druid. Last week we met with the council, met with the Solicitor General, and one of the ideas that was discussed as a potential help was target hardening. So I'm wondering what knowledge you have of that, what kind of education programs might be available, and what really that boils down to, because we didn't get a whole lot of background on it at that time.
I don't know, unfortunately. I'd have to research that. I'm not
Okay.
sure. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Christopherson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Two questions. The homeless count is increasing, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Your Worship. Absolutely, the homeless count from 2020 versus the 2018 count is wildly higher, with the caveat that the metric changed for how homeless was calculated between 2018 and 2020 to include those that are couch surfing functionally. And so that is not to say that homeless population it very well may be increasing, but if you're basing it solely on the 2018 to 2020 counts, you have to compare apples to apples, and there was completely different methodology applied to those two counts, and so I really have some reservation in applying too much stock to that. The next homeless count that runs is going to have the exact same metrics applied to it. I think that that's really where you're going to put a little bit more stock into whether there's growth or not. But it's not to say that it isn't. It's just to say that I would not rely on those particular statistics to definitively prove that.
Yeah, I understand that part. In conversations in the community, there seems to be a feeling or an awareness that a lot of our homeless population is in previous years it was more local. You had a feeling of who was in town and so on, but that there's been a substantial increase in the number of outside influences coming into the city. So I'm wondering if that is indeed the case, or even if you can track something like that. And I can just leave it there because there probably isn't an answer, but I think the feeling in the community is that there are a lot of outside influences coming into Merritt that didn't used to be here, and easy to come in and easy to get out. My other question is basically, one of the statements in here is that our local municipal RCMP staff have more responsibilities outside of city boundaries, and I know we've raised the question before, but is there no way, is it possible to bill the province for services that our local people do that are out on the highway and so on? They're outside of our city boundaries.
So
we're paying for it.
I can take this one, Councillor Christopherson, to there. For providing services, especially emergency services, through different jurisdictions, there's a couple of different models. So our fire department actually does basically exactly the same thing. We have a fire department, we have fire trucks, they service our municipality. When they leave town, they're all our assets. When they leave town, we bill EMBC at a fixed rate per fire truck, per crew, per hour. And so the province has entered into a contract with us to provide those services. The RCMP pursue a different model. So they provide us with a certain number of RCMP officers to, I guess, offset the additional duties that they have external to the municipality. There is no current mechanism to bill anything back because they provide a certain number of officers. There is definitely in our statistics that we've talked through together some increases, such as some highway patrol and whatnot, that perhaps haven't been included in the numbers. I know that number has been 5 for quite a long time, and especially was 5 before that 2020 shift in responsibilities. But the mechanism for that wouldn't be directly billing the province. It would be to negotiate with the province on what that number of officers is, and on a man-hour basis, what are we spending internal versus external to the municipality.
Thank you. My point is basically we're providing a lot of. We're in a rather unique position in Merritt with such a main highway running through us, and there should be some way to compensate for the fact that a lot of our officers' time is spent not in the city, but doing provincial duty.
I couldn't agree more. Certainly when we look at that, I don't know what that split is, and I don't have the publicly available statistics in this particular report to say we're spending 1.5 times as many hours externally as we are internally. Those would have to be statistics that either come from the province or the local RCMP.
And if I can go to local RCMP first, and can you give us a bit of a challenge on the way you build the province?
Well, so Sean is right. I mean, within the RCMP, there's no mechanism where we build the province. I've never come across that. But I think what I'll say is this, and Sean talked a bit about that, I think, because I too looked quite deeply into what's happening here in Merritt. And I can say that with confidence that our officers are extremely busy. When I looked at crime rate in Merritt for the municipal jurisdiction, and I compared that with municipal jurisdictions between 5,000 and 15,000 population, so we call them the 70-30 splits, municipal detachments. We found that that our crime rate is above the provincial average, and I think that the stats here that Sean provided kind of talks about I went a little bit deeper on that and looked at the criminal case burden that our officers are dealing with, and also the call for service burden that our officers are dealing with. Because understandably, not every call for service is necessarily equates to a crime all the time. And again, there, my analysis is, I guess, identified that in 2020, my officers here, criminal case burden in the municipal jurisdictions was higher than the provincial average. And when I looked at the calls for service burden, again, I was able to see that the call for service burden is higher than the provincial average. So as the chief of police here, that tells me that, my officers are working harder than the provincial average. And yet, we do have some good success stories that we're proud of, that Sean talked about when you looked at clearance rate. When I looked at 2020, and we saw that overall, for our detachment, so that would be including the provincial area and the municipal areas, we've seen nearly a 21% decrease in crime. I don't know why that is, but I also speculate that COVID and less people out has had an impact on that. It will be interesting to see at the end of 2021 where we are. I'm paying close attention. I can tell you that currently we are still, I guess, if you compare 2021 right now to 2020 at the same time last year, we're projected for a further decrease, but I have been watching that decrease narrow as the months are going by. It is impossible for me to tell you that what it's going to be like at the end of the year, whether that may convert into an increase. But again, we do have nearly a 21% decrease from last year. So if I was to see, I guess what I'm saying is if I was to see a slight increase in 2021, I would pay attention to it, of course, but I might not be as alarmed as if we had seen this significant decrease in 2020.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, what I really wanted to say, because this is where the politics of the issue really comes into play, and we've talked about this as a community before, this split between provincial and municipal resources, and I think that there is a real tendency to want to make sure that we understand every statistic in advance before we kind of bring this argument to the province to say we really ought to have more provincial resources allocated to the city of Merritt. And to some extent I sympathize with and still feel that way, but I will say that I think that there may be merit to the argument of saying, here are some of the changes that have happened in our community. Here's the amount of resources that we've had. Here's what the municipality has invested and what we're seeing. And yet we continue to see the same number on the provincial side. Will you please conduct a review of this that takes into account municipal burden in provincial jurisdictions versus provincial in municipal, and so that it's not necessarily the city doing that work, so it allows them to go through that exercise. So I think requesting a review of the provincial officer count, I think, is probably we're at the point where I think that's a wise ask from council, and that's something that I think that we should be preparing to draft and should probably be talking about more once we get that information at the police committee meeting. So I think that that's one mechanism, because I know the taxpayers are feeling the burden of it locally. As Sean indicated, we fund a lot, and so making sure that some of these issues that very likely could be issues caused by virtue of our location along highways, having some additional provincial support to address some of those issues would be more than welcomed at this point. So I think that RCMP, of course, is only one piece of this puzzle, but it's it's a critical piece, and that's one kind of concrete step that council can take, and I think that we should be looking at a little bit more closely in the committee meeting on Friday.
Thank you. Councillor Lucky, you,
Yeah, just one thing. I remember in other cities I've lived in and been on councils with and everything, we used to have the staff sergeant or the chief of police come and do a quarterly report. I think that would be really valuable for council and for the public right now. If you were to come and do a quarterly report to council, would that be at all feasible? I think that would be a good thing for the community, so we can see the stats going up or down, or how you think you're going on a quarterly basis. Because right now, I've been here 3 years now. I don't think I've seen a single report from the RCMP or anything in the public
been some.
council. Have we had one before?
several.
Yeah. So do we do them on a quarterly basis, Mayor, or is that something you might want to?
Councillor,
I'm just asking. I'm just throwing out. I'm not directing. I'm just asking.
well, from my perspective, I have no problem with it. Of course, we do the quarterly police committee, and forgive my ignorance if I get this wrong here, but I guess my reporting has been to the police committee with the understanding that the information would, be elevated to council as and when required. But again, I'm happy to come to a general council meeting as well as the police committee. That's
Yeah, we can talk about what we need and how often you come. And if you're willing to come to council, then we'll put that invite out to you, and let's discuss that at some point.
Yeah, I think it'd be good for the council and the public too, right? Because not too many of them are going to show up at the police committee meeting quarterly, but certainly a lot of them tune into that council meeting, right? So it'd be kind of good. Yeah. Anyway, just not an ask.
A lot of people will now.
Now they can change to put the word out, so that's really good.
Councillor Red.
Thank you. Thank you.
Did you turn?
Well, I was just wanting to reiterate what Surgeon already said, is that through committee, that's where the council members can report what we discuss in committee, the decisions, to bring it forward to council. And that's the same as finance, police, or whatever committee that we already have. So getting this information and having committee this week, I think that would be maybe the next thing that we could bring up at the next meeting.
And I'd like to add that Staff Sergeant Major comes and meets with the CAO and myself once a month. So we do get input. We don't often move it into council's hands. And maybe we need to change that up.
Or even an information item,
Yeah, a lot of it isn't documented. So we'll work on something.
Yeah, and as far as reporting goes, I think last committee meeting was April. There was a report provided then, and I've got one here actually in front of me for this Friday. So it will be provided, to the city. Well, I think it already has been distributed for the committee members. So
It has. So I wanted to mention too that the WEP program that we were talking about, Councillor Luck, is our work experience program. These individuals come to us already trained. There has been many rumors that they come untrained, we train them and they leave. They're already trained. They come here, they work mainly a Monday to Friday shift, and that replaces some of our lack of volunteers that we have during the Monday to Friday day shift when most of our volunteers are working. So these are the young individuals that take over that so-called call for those people that are already working. And they do a lot of call on evenings and weekends too. They work a lot while they're here, and we get a lot out of them. And they also work medical call. So I know my mother and father, as they were falling, you call the fire department or you call 911, and the fire department shows up with all of these young guys just willing to pick up the elderly, and we get a lot of service out of them in terms of much better response times, and I don't know what else we get from them, but it's a worthwhile program. And all they're paid is on call, and only 2 are paid on call. But you ask any of the elderly around here that have had to show up at their house, there's always 3 or 4 of them going. There's a couple of them that are going just for the experience, not for the money. So it's a great program. So I think that's all we have, unless Constable Feller wants to talk a little bit about the CPO office that we haven't talked about and its role in the community. Or am I putting you on the spot by? Oh, I need it. Turn your mic on.
No, I'm happy to talk quickly about the CPO office. I work with a civilian staff member there, Marlene Jones, and we are more than happy to field a lot of community concerns that come in and ask questions, ask questions to the public, and have the public ask questions to us regarding some of the activities going on in town. One thing that we can do as well to kind of deviate an allocation of resources as well is the municipal RCMP, we deal a lot with calls for service that may come in and be city bylaw related, that we better pass to a municipal city services bylaw officer. And it's at that level there that I can direct those individuals to follow up with city municipal bylaw services to basically allow us as the RCMP not to be burdened with those additional calls for service where there's a more appropriate resource to deal with those on the city level. And of course, that allows then, even for myself, I know this afternoon I was dispatched to a barking dog complaint. I know that barking dog complaints are a complaint that the city bylaw services deals with that would be better handled by a city bylaw services member than a member of the RCMP, where we say are investigating break-in enters and other persons or property crimes, right? So that office there, I think, generates a great value for the city. It allows us to stream a lot of information in from the public, and it allows people to come and provide us anonymous information as well if they feel that maybe their call isn't, say, valid for a 911 emergency call, but they still want to speak to an officer quite readily. I operate out of that office probably about 60% of my time. I do also carry a caseload as well, which requires me to work out of the Merritt RCP detachment to facilitate use of secure document transfers and other things like that. But I am down in the office quite a bit. And through that office, I facilitate foot patrols, community school liaisons. I liaise with some of the other groups here in the community, like Ask Wellness that does harm reduction, and some of our other city social services and mental health supports.
And if I can, I just want to add something here, just to be very transparent and open about some of the things that we faced here this year. And Constable Feller's, has done a fantastic job with the community policing portfolio, and to address some of the things that Jane mentioned earlier about downtown safety. We looked at this in the earlier part of the year, and we initiated a patrol program where we wanted to increase police visibility through proactive foot patrols in the downtown core. Combine that with a program that is related to a business watch that the community policing office is running. But a number of things happened this summer. As you may recall, in June there was a serious police incident that resulted in quite frankly, in a gun exchange between the police and an offender. And as a result of this, some of the members involved were, were taken off frontline duties for a period of time. And so that prompted me to do a number of things to maintain boots on the ground, so to speak. One of those things was to rob from some of my units within the detachment to keep minimums on the road. Dave was one of those officers that I had to say to him in June, I'm sorry for the foreseeable future. I need to shift you from your substantive responsibility here and come and do core frontline policing response. That being said, I'm very proud of my team and Dave here, because despite that, Between April and July, primarily Dave and my members were able to participate in 83 proactive foot patrols in the downtown core. Now, we had a goal to do more than that. And we have a goal to continue that through the year. But of course, as I explained, there are sometimes external factors that impact my ability to leverage the members that I have to do certain things, because I have a need to keep boots on the ground for core policing response. So a long-winded kind of explanation, but I thought it was important that I explain that and be open and transparent about the pressure that we have experienced as it relates to the community policing office and our efforts to have a strong presence in the downtown core by way of the foot patrol.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Constable Feller, for your explanation.
Oh, my pleasure.
There's another question that I have in terms of the investigation. When we have a crime investigation and the Southeast unit comes to investigate, these are additional costs for the city.
Yes, if so, that would be, I guess it depends on the nature of the file, but if we're talking a major crime investigation, I will pick one for example, a homicide that takes place within the city limits would result in cost to the city.
Okay, so that's additional over and above what we normally budget, we still get charged for. Any other questions, comments for our two police officers in uniform? While they are here, this is your time to ask us questions. Councillor White.
Is that the only, is homicide the only extra cost, or?
Well, no, there's a matrix of major police incidents. They call it, so homicide is one example. I'm trying to think of what else. Like a ransom-based kidnapping would be another example. And and like I said, there's a short list of major cases that would trigger a response from a major crime unit.
But most of the time, if we have a major crime unit assigned and it is the city's, within the city limits that this crime took place, we'll be charged for it.
That's correct.
If I may, there's other units within the RCMP that would render services to the municipality at no cost to the municipality as well. So for example, I know that Merritt's not something that would be particularly prone to that, but for example, the RCMP does have an explosive ordnance disposal unit, and they respond to calls at a cost borne to their unit and not the detachments that call it in typically. And so that would be, in the event of a circumstance like that ever occurring in Merritt, that would be a cost borne by the province 100% and not by the city.
May we never see the explosives team in the city of Merritt.
I was thinking the same thing, yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for showing up and giving us this explanation. I appreciate it very much, and we all, I think, have learned a little bit from this.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Night.
Good night. So there is no public hearing. There is no general unfinished business. That was 7.1. We're now on 7.2, notices of motion. Last week I put in 3 notices of motion, and 2 of them have been acted on already by staff, so there's no need to move further on that. But there is a recommendation that council instructs city staff to research common practices in comparably sized communities regarding buffer zone distances between retail cannabis stores and to propose amendments to the zoning bylaw accordingly. I move that. Somebody, Councillor Christopherson, second. Any comments? All in favor? That was unanimous. Thank you. And moving on to 8 in our bylaws, number 8.1 has been removed until the next meeting. And 8.2 will be introduced by Mr. Strang. It's our 2022 to 2024 permissive exemptions.
Okay. No development services, all finance. That's what we're doing tonight. Permissive exemptions. So the good news here is that last year, so we moved, I believe in 2016 to a 4-year cycle of permissive exemptions, in which a slate gets approved every 4 years, and in the intervening years, all we see is either new applications or changed applications. So this year we've got from each category. Where are we here? 2022 additions and changes. There's a couple of applicants here and one additional change that we need to make. The first applicant, the Fraser Basin Property Society, which is the Anglican Church. They were in the slate of 4 applicants, applicants from last year, of 4-year approval. They proceeded after that point to subdivide their property, so this is mostly a procedural thing. When somebody subdivides or changes a property on the BC assessment side, the permissive exemption no longer applies to any of that property, as it's not descriptive of the actual property. So this permissive exemption for, and specifically the Fraser Basin Property Society, is solely for the remaining part that's going to be used as the Anglican Church. The other property is going to be used for other uses, and at this point it will be assessed at full value for whatever that is. The other applicant is a daycare, which is a new applicant. The only somewhat complicating factor here, not complicating, but factor to note, is that it is a permissive exemption for 2 properties. So they are, I believe, setting up in what I think used to be a mechanic shop. I'm not sure. It's been an empty building since I've been here, but they've been sprucing it up, and I'm sure if you've driven by, you've seen some playground equipment being set up there. So the place where the playground equipment is set up is an empty lot, and then the building itself is actually a different folio. So council in this case would be granting a permissive exemption for 2 different properties under the same society at this point. So reviewing their application, they, I'm going to say they're a new business in the community, but they're a new business in their current form. They used to operate at an NBIT. From what I understand, NBIT had a shuffling of space and square footage constraints, and so this Child Care Society has now located elsewhere in the community. And so they're opening up a bunch of spots for people in the community. The other one that's in here is the golf course property. We should
I apologize, yes. Sorry, Your Worship, there should have been a 5th change to the agenda, it turns out.
I don't know that we need to actually switch the order of them, though.
So basically there are 2 bylaws in here that Mr. Strang is presenting, and he's currently speaking about the additions to the permissive tax exemptions, but the next bylaw you'll be considering is to remove the golf club from the permissive tax exemptions as they are. So it would probably be neater if you did the removal first and then add everything in, but nothing's been moved or seconded yet, so it's really no way. And it's all the same permissive tax topic, so I would say it's easiest if you just talk to them and as a single item explain through the whole thing, and then if council move the removal bylaw before the second addition bylaw.
I will lead into exactly that sequence, Greg. Thank you, sir. The third one on here is the golf course property. So originally in 2016, when we switched to 4-year exemptions, late exemptions, the golf course is actually a number of different properties. This specific property has a clubhouse that's responsible for about 5-ish%, 4-point-something% of its assessable value. In the 2016 permissive tax bylaw, there was a little note that said permissive tax exemption is granted for all except the portion of the clubhouse that sells alcoholic beverages and functions fairly similar to what a bar does. This is, I mean, it sounds small, 4.5%, but it's a fairly important procedural thing because we can't, as a town council, we can't give favorable treatment to any entity that would take away from private businesses in town. So the first bylaw that we're going to be looking at here is waiving the permissive exemption for that particular golf course property for the next 3 years. The second one, which is new permissive exemptions, is granting them, again, the golf course for everything except that small portion of the clubhouse, if that makes sense. Somewhat complicated, but this is mostly just really super fun stuff. So I guess what we should probably be doing is 8.3, a bylaw to amend exemption from taxation, and this is bylaw 2323. In your agenda,
they're numbered properly in the bylaw sequence, they're just not ordered properly in the agenda.
Yeah, actually. The recommendation on this one, this is again the golf course property, we're moving it for the next 3 years. The recommendation is that council read bylaw 2323 as presented and remove the golf course for the next 3 years. And I think we would deal with that first.
Yes, and then 2324 would be to add 3 amendments back in: the Anglican Church, the daycare, and the golf course as amended.
And
So
between 3 and 4, we add a remove clause?
I think the easiest way to do this is just to proceed with the reading of bylaw 2323.
Yes.
And then if there's any discussions, move that bylaw will be passed, and then I'll go into 2324 after.
Oh, okay.
You just made it as confusing as
Right.
possible.
I'm confused and I wrote
I'm saying the
these.
same thing, but you want to speak in between
Yeah.
them, and that's fine. Okay. So the recommendation is that council read the proposed City of Merritt bylaw 2323 as presented a first time, and that is for 2 bylaws,
Just the one, your worship.
two properties, Fraser Basin and...
No, your worship.
Just
Sorry.
removal of the golf course.
I'm sorry, your worship. Bylaw 2323 would remove the golf course from the permissive tax exemptions because of its because they're selling liquor and acting as a bar. If you then do 3 readings on bylaw 2323, then it would be very sensible to move on to bylaw 2324, where, among other things, the non-bar portions of the golf course would be added back in.
Okay, so totally the opposite of what I was asking for. But thank you for that explanation. Now we're looking at that council read the property or the proposed City of Merritt bylaw 2323 as presented the first time, and that gives the golf course. All in favor?
Move and second.
Oh, we need a mover and a seconder.
When can we ask a question?
Luck and Etchart. We can ask the question now.
Is that the whole golf course or just the food part of it?
Just.
Thank you, Councillor White, through the mayor. The golf course itself is comprised of a number of properties. I don't actually know, I think there's 4 or 5. So this is the property that basically encompasses the parking lot and the clubhouse, more or less, but the next bylaw will exempt that property, except for the small portion of it that serves alcoholic beverages. So,
Okay,
thank you.
thanks. Okay, so then let's say
It's not time.
No other questions? All in favor? And that was unanimous. I need a mover and a seconder. The council read the proposed City of Merritt bylaw 2323 as presented a second time. Luck and Etchart. I mean Christofferson and Etchart. Anyone want to speak to this one? All in favor? Opposed, none, unanimous. I need a mover and seconder. The council read the proposed City of Merritt bylaw 2323 as presented a third time.
Second.
Chart and Luck, and I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None. Carried unanimously. Okay, that was one part. Now the second part. Are you going to speak in between these two?
I don't actually have any need to, so this bylaw 2324 is just to exempt, again, the golf course with the exception of that small square footage, the Child Care Society, and the remaining building of the Anglican Church.
Are we all understanding that? Okay. I need a mover and seconder. The council read the proposed City of Merritt permissive tax exemption bylaw 2324 as presented the first time.
Second.
Luck and White. And any comments, questions, concerns? All in favor? Opposed? None. Carried unanimously. And council read the proposed City of Merritt permissive tax exemption bylaw 2324 as presented a second time.
Second.
Christopherson and Etchart. And anybody want to speak? No? All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried unanimously. And that council read the proposed City of Merritt permissive tax exemption bylaw 2324 as presented a third time.
Second.
Etchart Luck. And all in favor? Opposed? None? Carried unanimously. That does it. Then, now move on to new business, 9.1, 2021 elevator repair retrofit for our arena. Mr. McEwen, oh, there you are. I don't know where you came from.
He just appeared. It was quite amazing.
Just appeared. Yeah.
Took the elevator up.
Thank you for having me, Worship Council. I'm here to share some information with you in regards to the background on the elevator repair. The elevator repair at the arena has had extensive repairs over the past few years that I've been here, speaking to Mr. Zacco as well, who's been around the arena for a couple of decades. It's been repaired extensively at a high cost. So the reason why I wrote that in there is one of the big components is just the main circuit board. The way that the elevator is currently designed, it basically has the modules all on one circuit board. If one of the modules fries, it's a whole circuit board. It's an all-in-one, and it's a $5,000 ticket. And there have been several times that has been repaired. On top of that, it has a self-closer that doesn't have a safety mechanism on it. So when you engage the button, the door opens automatically, someone comes in, and then it closes automatically. When you put force on that door, it can actually fry one of these components and actually shear and snap the auto closer at the top. It doesn't have a disengage or a safety on it. So, yeah.
So send your children through.
Yeah, it's the door will stop, and it's like got a shear pin, and that shear pin is a $2,500 fix. So it's meant for accessibility access only. Over the years, it's been used by volunteers as well to get heavy products up to the concession that's up there, and used thousands of times by them, if not tens of thousands of times through the years. And there have been a few incidents that it wasn't working after it was used, and not sure what happened, type of thing. So but regardless, it was not functioning, and we need to get it up and functioning. So over the past several months, we engaged different companies, elevator companies, that have done retrofits on elevators such as this one in different municipalities. We engaged a local contractor, electrician, to make further inquiries with these companies and gather information that would be kind of the best company to do the best fix for what we have in Merritt. And that is funded to the amount of $42,758
of which, in speaking to the finance department, it looked like that could be funded from the Community Works Gas Tax Reserve Fund.
Thank you. Anybody have questions for Mr. McEwen? Councillor Edger. Sorry.
So currently the elevator is in use, but would it be accurate to say that it could have an issue at any time, opening or closing, where somebody could get stuck in there, or?
Councillor Edger, through your worship, the elevator is not in use right now. The elevator has been disabled for several months as we collected this information to make the best appropriate choice of either repairing it under operations or retrofitting it. So the information that we got back from the company that's repaired in the past said that it was a $9,500, I don't know the exact, $9,480 or something like that, to do the repair, and they wouldn't guarantee that once those two things were fixed, when they hit start again, that it was going to be functioning. There could be something else. So I just said, yeah, we're not repairing it, then we're looking at something else. So
you could spend $10,000 for something to nickel and dime until it's complete.
Yeah. In my time here, I have done that to do a repair, and twice, which added up to just over $10,000 on two of the repairs. And as a tax dollar, I couldn't do that, and throw good money at something that needed to be fixed. And this is the fix.
Seems like a waste to keep repairing an old. Yeah. Thank you.
Something that I will add is that if we go this route, we're up to 9 weeks away before the repair.
Well into hockey season.
Well into hockey season.
Oh,
yes.
no.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Scott, for the information, and thank you for clarifying what you just did there with Councillor Chart's question. The difference between a repair and a retrofit. I like the idea of retrofitting if we're continuously having similar problems that are adding up over the years. So I'm in favor of a retrofit. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, and we need a mover. That council approve the 2021 capital budget amendment of $42,758 to be funded from the Community Works Gas Tax Reserve Fund to complete the needed repair retrofit of the Nicola Valley Memorial Arena elevator. Christopherson and Luck. And any debate? Councillor Bengu.
Thank you, Mayor. Perhaps not a debate, more of a question. I think most of us are aware that the arena does require attention, and from what I'm gathering, perhaps we are in need of a new arena. Have we planned for this? Are we planning for this? Will we be discussing this at any future point? Thank you.
I know that we just came out of a strategic planning meeting, and this was not brought up at that point. So it is not on our immediate needs, but it will be assessed by staff when they look at the asset plan.
Your Worship, I could speak to Councillor Bangu on this topic. Last year, we actually engaged a company that did an asset management review on that building, as well as our aquatic center. In that report, it identified that the arena has a lot of, the arena has a foundation of which those components still have longevity and life in them. So they pointed more towards retrofit, keeping up on things, maintenance level budget for that, of which some are, and you'll see in this next year's budget, the condenser in the six-figure form. But when you start talking about replacing an arena, you're talking about millions.
Mr. Smith.
And so we want you to know, just again, you've heard us say that we're going to be operating from plans moving forward. When it comes to arena items that you're going to see on here, you're going to see elements of this plan brought forward for this and the Nicola Valley Memorial, the Aquatic Center as well. Because I think that you need to not just take our word for it, but know that these are items that experts are putting forward to be able to maximize the assets that the council's looking at. So you're absolutely right. I think it'd be a dream to have a phenomenal, brand new, larger arena and everything that we dream of. But in terms of making the most of the asset that's there, this really is the most prudent course, is to take care of what we have and maximize its lifespan.
To add to your second comment there, Councillor Bangu, I have spoke to Director Anderson, Finance Director Anderson, and about making plans for that, for asset replacement, and what does that look like, and he is educating me on how he would propose that we do that moving forward for all of our assets that we have.
Thank you, man. It sounds like you're on top of it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, wait. The arena that we have, how many, how many people is it built for?
Rough numbers off my head, Councillor Wright, through your worship, about 950 in the seating capacity for the arena, and the mezzanine occupancy roughly 160.
So we need a little bit bigger population to fill it up.
There's a lot of different components to that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any other comments? Okay, it's sorely needed, this retrofit. I agree, it needs to be done. I'm going to ask the question, all in favor? Opposed? None? Carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we go back to 9.2, asset management grant application. FCM and UBCM, and this is introduced again by Mr. Strang. Mr. Strang.
I will answer to anything if you point in my general direction. Strang, whatever you need. Asset management. So we've talked a little bit about this. My name is on the presenting of this, but I will take very, very little credit for it. This is certainly a lot of work that's been on Wayne's desk in terms of looking at the strategic focus and the implementation plan on it, and a significant amount of work on Andrew's desk, and Andrew being our, help me out here, grant coordinator, what is the official, our grant coordinator for the next, I think about 6 months, something like that. So Andrew's put in a ton of work in looking at a bunch of different grants for the city, and came up with this specific one. Council has directed in the past to look at some asset management solutions, look at an asset management implementation, and I can tell you from the number of spreadsheets that we use in finance and public works and in facilities that certainly it will be a welcome addition when it is implemented. This specific one, Wayne broke this up into basically 3 stages of implementing an asset management plan. So the first stage is more or less a year, asset management policy development. And so policy development is really what we're looking for approval for this next step here. The step 2 is asset management plan development, and then step 3 is actually purchasing, implementing the software. What we are looking for at this point here, sorry, I'm just scrolling through to try and get to the correct numbers. We're looking for a commitment of about $100,000, of which 65% of it is grant funded through 2 different grants that Andrew was able to find. So this scope doesn't cover necessarily an up and functioning asset management software where we can point and say, hey, we have 3 different HVAC units that were built in 1982, and the condensers on these usually go within 27 years. That's where we'd like to end up at the end of year 3. But for year 1, what we really need to do is look at the existing data that we have, which is within the organization in a number of spreadsheets, develop a strategy going forward based on this data. What kind of assets are we tracking? What kind of value in these assets we are tracking? and then really put together some policies and procedures that will guide the program for the next 2 years. Year 2 is going to actually look at assets. So we've done some of this heavy lifting back in 2016, without looking at this. I wasn't here, but from 2016 there was some asset management planning and development programs that went through at that point in time. We did a roads assessment. I have a bunch of data on, various points that every single fire hydrant is and what year it was built. So we do actually have some pretty good data from that 2016. So that's what we're going to kind of look at in the next year. Year 2 is getting more of that data for the remainder of our assets and looking at road beds, looking at the linear feet of curbs and gutters and what kind of condition they're in, and just very stuff that I'm excited about, but may not be all that exciting. And then year 3 is really kind of when that all comes together. So you can know a lot about how many linear meters of curbs and gutters you have and where your benches are and what kind of condition they're in. But until you put that all together in a specific tool that says you need to invest approximately $6,000 per year in benches in order to maintain the level of assets and benches that you have, you're not going to have a put together functional tool. So that's kind of the goal for year 3, is to end up with some really great reporting in terms of how much exact money we need to put into all our different asset categories, but we will have a fairly good idea of that in year 2 in what exact assets we have and what shape that they're in, and we will be able to have a whole lot more ad hoc reporting.
Mr. Smith, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, only to say that we're going to try and band-aid that for you for this upcoming budget season, because one thing that we know is we do have a lot of master plans that are in place right now. We do have an existing asset management plan that does set out, not in the degree of specificity that Sean is talking about, that's really going to be actionable on a particular basis, but it does give you general levels that we will need to be able to spending towards in order to make sure that we're not just meeting our infrastructure deficit, but hopefully closing that infrastructure gap. So despite the fact that it's not in the format that makes it easily and readily useful for staff and for council, we will be ensuring that you have some of that information to be able to make those decisions that you need to make at the upcoming budget season. The other thing that I wanted to add, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Sean, but this plan is also done in conjunction with some of the financial changes for accounting requirements that are going to necessitate asset retirement obligation changes. Oh, you're on it. I'm sorry.
I'm not there yet.
Well, just be quiet.
So ideally that would be in year 2 or 3. We do have, this is again really exciting finance stuff. We do have new, as Sean mentioned, AROs, or asset retirement obligations, where we have to look at a number of buildings. And Merritt actually won't be highly complex as some bigger, older cities, but if there's a building, for example, that has asbestos in it, if we're not planning on knocking it down, we still have to make an estimate of how much it would cost to actually knock that down. And the interesting thing about AROs, of course, is that it goes up over time with inflation. So we need to have a fairly good idea of what those assets are. Year 1 is really about getting together a bunch of data and putting together some policies and procedures, and that's really what we're looking for in this specific nod in this specific budget. But in conjunction with that, we're kind of going to be running a much more detailed project. As Sean said, there's one specific project on a 10-year asset management plan for some public works and for some facilities, and then there's the asset retirement obligation piece as well. And those will both be built outside of the tool. The data will be used in year 2 and year 3 to import into the tool that we end up selecting, so that we'll just have a much better built piece where we have all the data in one particular place. But there is going to be some fairly detailed stuff happening in year 1 around arrows, because you just legitimately have to. It's a requirement at this point. And there is a fairly detailed spreadsheet around some road conditions, some priorities of some assets out there. We just, until year 3, we won't have this well put together tool that says, as it says in here, is this piece of road servicing the hospital, or is it a back alley servicing three lots? We have that kind of more of an ad hoc basis right now. The tool itself will visualize that on a much larger scale. So in conjunction with this, in order to get these 2 grants, we are required to, of course, get council buy-in from this. but get a commitment with proceeding with the remainder of the asset management plan and execution up to the final stage of it. And so what we're looking for from council right now is the direction to A, spend this money, and B, move forward with the rest of the asset management plan and see it through to completion. That's really the gist of what we're looking for tonight for direction. Andrew has been hanging out for most of the evening in case you do have any specific inquiries on the grant. He's very dialed into that. Wrote up a whole bunch of spreadsheets and everything else on these, and I will be more than happy to field any specific finance questions.
Before I go to council questions, I've been remiss in introducing Andrew to those of us that do not know him. Andrew is our new grants coordinator who has been with us for a couple of weeks at least. Welcome to the team.
Thank you.
And Councillor White.
Didn't we just, over the last 2 or 3 years, get grants for asset management?
Mr. Smith.
What we got was some free training, so very limited grant funding to be able to do some training, and what that training led us to was the fact that we are not yet at a spot where that particular training was of utmost use to us. We're still, I think, one step back of really needing to put a lot of this information together, particularly those policies, procedures, and putting kind of the fundamentals of the plan together. So there was a very minimal grant to facilitate some of that training, but I will say it ended up not being hugely beneficial for where we're at in the plan implementation.
And it is that specific program, I believe that what you're talking about is referenced in this report, and the upshot of it was talking about levels of service and some other things, but the beginning exercise and a lot of it was rating how ready the community, or how deep into asset management the community is on a scale of 1 to 5, and Merritt very clearly was a number 1 on most of these, and I think a lot of what that came about was there was a large number of metrics that we looked at and said, hey, we need some work done in a number of different areas where we're scoring a 1 here. And so it was useful for sure, the specific stuff beyond that we maybe weren't at the level to be able to achieve, but it was useful for the fact that now we have this in front of council saying that, you know, this is a priority project for the finance department.
Councillor Christophe.
So I can understand that Sean Strang and Wayne will be really excited about this. Is Charlie excited?
Came in and explained through their software, and there was pretty good uptake and enthusiasm from Sky, from Charlie. And as you can imagine, it's fairly useful for Charlie when he's looking at a capital project budget and can visually see, you know, 10 different roads that need fixing, and is able to actually assign a priority to those based on traffic flow, based on priority, based on development plans. I think it probably has a lot of benefit to finance in terms of, hey, I now have an ARO tool that I can use instead of a spreadsheet. But honestly, I think a ton of the value here is actually for guys like Sky, guys like Charlie, in that they have something that they can see. And again, from the example before, Sky will be able to see how old his HVAC units are without calling up somebody and going, hey, can you go to the roof? Just go look at this. I think that is a very functional
I was being a little facetious there, but I think it sounds like this will be
it's hard to push things like this as an organization into a number of different departments, so it's a very, very valid question, and I think that it is important that this comes not as a finance project, but as a city project.
And Mr. Smith, one moment. I think it's the role of finance to help the other departments love it.
Yeah, definitely. I can't see any downside for it.
Mr. Smith.
Asset management is absolutely critical. I know council knows it. What I will say, and I think that council probably also knows, that there's a reason we're not particularly far ahead with asset management right now. It is debatably the most time-consuming project that we need to implement. It is not measured in tens or it's hundreds of hours, and some municipalities take 1,000 plus people hours to put asset management plans to get from start to finish. And so this is a circumstance where everybody will be thrilled and elated for the final product, but there is going to be toil, blood, sweat, and tears to get us there, and recognizing, what other items we have on the docket. I think that we're really excited for the final product. We are gearing up to bring this product there, but this is going to be a big multi-year project, and I really do want to impress upon council just the size and commitment that this undertaking really brings on. There's consultants that assist and do things, but there's a huge municipal component from a lot of different individuals that put this together.
And I understand the multi-year project that you're talking about. I've been involved in implementing an asset management system from Coast Mountain School District, and it is a massive project. And as long as you keep making progress and perfecting the system is basically what you end up doing. You just keep going deeper and deeper and getting wider and wider. But it's sorely needed. And do we have a comment? Mr. Strang?
Sorry, we're just, my apologies here, we're just debating the exact procedural mechanism that we need to proceed with this. The grant requires us to receive a direct direction from council to apply for the grant. It also requires a direction from council, or a commitment from council to, at the bottom of page 3, top of page 4, council commits to conduct the following activities, and then there's 3 activities: asset management policy, asset management plan development, and purchasing of an asset management software. And we were just discussing whether we needed a formal vote from council to achieve that, or whether it would stay as an information item. So, okay, we do have that. Okay. My apologies, thank you.
So this is one recommendation, one motion required. We're not going to split it up at all. So
Perfect.
we need a mover that council directs staff to apply for the UBCM Asset Management Planning Program grant in conjunction with FCM's Municipal Asset Management Program MAMP grant. And the maximum combined grant funding is $65,000 to assist with the 2022 project with an estimated cost of $100,000. And that council commits to conduct the following activities in the proposed project submitted to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, MAMP, to advance our asset management program in asset management policy development, basic asset management plan development, purchasing of asset management software, and that council directs staff to oversee project management and the management of funds that are awarded.
So moved.
Christopherson, Etchart? And anyone want to speak to this?
I think we've already said it, but I'm very much in favor of this. It's been a long time coming, and I think it's absolutely integral to the smooth operation of the city. So very much in favor of it.
Speaking my language, love it. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Let's back that up. Councillor Fair.
Just more words in favor. It's a long-term investment that I think will be more valuable as the city and our asset management needs grow. So, yeah, it will only be more costly down the road, so let's get it done.
Councillor Etchart.
Just reiterating similar comments, we need to have a plan, and then with having a document that's easily accessible for future councils and groups to look at, it makes it easier for strategic planning, and it just makes sense to do it now. Thank you.
Call once again for the vote. All in favor? Approved, opposed, none. That was unanimous. Thank you. Now we have notice of motions. And there are none. Okay, we have reports from council.
I just wanted to report that at a recent meeting from the food bank, that they were able to share that they had distributed some 93,000 pounds of donations and goods to people in need during the fires and evacuations that happened over the last couple of months. And I just wanted to acknowledge the hard work of the volunteers in the community that helped out with that, and also to the Elks Hall for having given the space to the food bank to assist them with this project. It was a great appreciation for people in need and great help to evacuees. And it was really a nice thing for the community and surrounding communities that came here for assistance and help. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, and I wanted to say that volunteers are the heart of a community, and the city of Merritt is blessed to have many of them. A lot of time, long hours, strenuous hard work, passion, freely given and without reservation. These volunteers stepped up and stepped in to help not only this community, but our neighboring communities, as well as when we needed it the most. Now that's community at its best. Thank you to all the firefighters and frontline workers, all the volunteers that fed them, ran errands for them, those who tried to make their lives easier. The city is ever so grateful for you all. Who knows where we would be without you? I, for one, don't even want to think about it. Again, thank you. It is people like you that make this community the best place on earth to live and work. At the same time, I want to say thank you to our healthcare workers and frontline workers who've given it your all throughout this COVID season. This includes the restaurant and retail workers as well that have to deal directly with the possibility of meeting COVID face-on. They've had to struggle just to make a living throughout the past year and a half. I can't imagine how tired people are, and there's still no end in sight. I'm sorry that you have to deal with the nasty people, with the protests everywhere you go, and many people that you actually serve. And I bet there were times that you felt you could barely make it through, and I'm sorry that you've had to endure all that. I want you to know that on behalf of council in the city, we appreciate you all. Thank you for all that you've done and for all that you have gone through. I'd like to encourage everyone to get vaccinated, unless you have a medical reason not to. It is through living and working together that we become stronger as a community. Our strength is in our community. We're stronger together. Well done, everyone.
Thank you.
The last thing before closed is item 12.2, which I guess is now 12.1. Doesn't really matter where we are. Granting aid, Nicola Valley Rodeo Association. And Mr. Strang, you're gonna, this whole agenda has been.
It's me. Yeah. It's the finance show today. This one is another fairly procedural one. So 2020, we ran a grant and aid process. Wasn't around for that one, but it was fairly common or fairly pedestrian. There was one particular one that was granted to the Rodeo Association for $7,500. That particular payment schedule, I'm not sure actually if it was council directed or we just decided, I wasn't around at that point, but half of it was given at the time and then half of it was supposed to be submitted upon completion of the plan. They didn't quite hit their timeline for the plan during the 2020 fiscal year. Only that half that they were given was actually recognized in the 2020 financial statements. There was no accrual for the remainder of it. We did give them an additional allowance to be able to get the report in during the 2021 year, which they did, but of course that $37.50 wasn't actually accrued as a payable during last year. So what we are suggesting to do, we of course still owe them that $37.50. They did provide the report, which is actually quite well done. I've included it along with this in case you would like to know what all the pens and paddocks and hard work on the 5-year plan they have cut out for them over there. Looks really good. We are going to cut the check. We had an existing grant and aid pool from 2021 that wasn't all spoken for. which covers this particular thing. So we don't need to do any particular budget amendments or financial amendments. We can call that 3750 and take it out of the pool of the 2021 grant and aid, which is why it was presented as an information item. And of course, I thought you might like to actually see the good work that they did over there that we are using Merritt, City of Merritt money for.
Awesome. Anybody have any comments on this? There is no resolution required. This is just provided for information.
Thank you.
Great job that the Rodeo Association has done on their 5-year plan. I too think it's amazing. So we will move on. And before we move on, council spent the last week with UBCM, which means we had a number of ministry meetings, and 5 to be exact. And I think each and every one of them went really well. And I would like to ask staff if we can just have a report, have our communications officer just prepare something for the public and put it on our website, just so that they know the gist of what we've been talking about with the ministry. Ease?
Absolutely, Your Worship.
Thank you. So this brings us to closed session. And I need a mover and a seconder that the meeting be closed to the press and public under section 91C of the Community Charter, labor relations or other employee relations.
Second.
All in favor?